We are broadcasting around the world. It is approximately 1 o'clock Arizona time, October 25th, 2012. Do you ever find yourself running around like you're a chicken with your head cut off? That's kind of how today has been for me. We've been super busy. We, of course, have 11 days before the liftoff and launch of AMTVmedia.com, our network channel. It is the most aggressive distribution network you have ever seen. And I'm very excited, tremendously excited. In fact, one of the surprises is, in fact, I'll just give it away here on the air right now, Green Wave will finally be going live. So I'm really excited about this, but we're working and testing the equipment, going through the kinks, make sure everything is working, and that's all a success. Have an amazing show today. In fact, we just put out our video previewing the program. Kent Bain, author of a fantastic book. I'll be interviewing him. I have the great pleasure of interviewing him in the second hour. He was recommended. He's been recommended by a few people, actually. He's the author of the most dangerous book in the world, 9/11 is Mass Ritual. You can check it out on Amazon.com. In fact, we put a link to it if you're interested. All about 9/11 truth. In fact, Vinny Eastwood brought Kent Bain to my attention, brought the book up. In fact, I was reading bits and pieces of it before the show, and I'm going to finish the book. So we'll get his take on the occult, 9/11 truth, and how this just ties into false flag, mind control, terrorism, just terror that's being pushed and spread on the American people. You know, I put another video. We're doing Green Wave Classic for the entire classic videos for the entire countdown. There's so much content that we put out that I personally put out over the past 3 years, a lot of which never really saw the time of day because our audience was small when we first started. You know, maybe it only got 20, 30, 100, couple hundred views. And so I'm introducing new but really old footage to the audience. One of them we just put out titled 2013. It's got a picture of a globe, talks about how the next president will inherit the financial collapse, will inherit the next Great Depression. And this isn't rocket science. I'm not a genius. There's a reason. In fact, watch this video because we put it out over a year and a half ago. Many of you don't know that, where I predicted quantitative easing 3, predicted that this would all come, how this ties into the election, how we're going to be fear-mongered into the next great war, how none of the stimulus, none of the bank bailouts will work. This is all just about buying more time, not for you, not for me, but for the elites in this country that are pickpocketing the dead carcass we now know as America. It's like, as I said in the film, you know, it's the equivalent of being at a funeral. You've got America's dead body. They're driving the nails into the coffin. But before doing that, they're pickpocketing the wallet of America. That's how ugly, grotesque, and evil their nature really is, and the nature of our government and the nature of our system. And it's important that we have a perspective on this. It's important that we don't lose sight of goodness in all of this. You know, I focus a lot of time deconstructing what's happening around us, deconstructing what's happening in the world today. And it's not to fearmonger you. It's not to scare the bejesus out of you. It's to show you the truth, which 9 out of 10 times is ugly. 9 out of 10 times is scary. But I don't want us to lose focus. I don't want to lose focus personally of goodness, of hope, of meaningful change, things that we are obviously not getting from the President of the United States today. We were sold a lie. It was a lie the whole time. It was a fabrication. You know, the tears that Oprah Winfrey were shedding in 2008 and the people were shedding were not real. Maybe they were coming real from a real place, from a real emotional state. The country's yearning. We were hoping. People were hoping. I knew Obama was a fraud from the get-go, but, you know, people were hoping. A lot of Americans got sucked into it. I talked to a lot of people on the show that call into the program and say, Christopher, you know, I voted for Obama, and now I know this guy is a criminal. I know that he is honestly out to seek and destroy the He's divisive. He's dividing the nation. And I want us to have a healthy perspective of this, because at the end of the day, we need to ask as people, as thinking, loving Americans, those of you tuning in that have a moral compass, that are focused on righteousness, that are focused to have the presence of right versus wrong in your life, good versus evil. A lot of you have faith. A lot of you have God. A lot of you have a higher power or a spirituality. I want you to tie into that, and I really want you to listen to what it's telling you. You know, I don't care if you're a Christian or a Catholic or a Buddhist, or it doesn't matter. You're spiritual. I want you to tune into whatever that is for you, whatever you sense, and whatever is in your gut. Maybe it's just your gut instinct. Maybe you're an atheist. You say, Christopher, I don't believe in anything. Or you're agnostic. You say, I don't believe in anything, but I don't really know. You know, you're the Christopher Hitchens type. It's funny how I'll see all kinds of atheists and people that I know personally that will just kind of use the Christopher Hitchens mentality as a crutch, you know. But still, you can't ignore the spiritual nature of things, and I don't think you can ignore a higher power. I don't think you can. And I'm not necessarily, at least today, here to preach one direction or another. What I'm here to do is get you thinking, bring you the truth at all costs. That's what I've been personally doing for over 3 years now. I love what I do. I have a tremendous passion for it. I couldn't do it without our audience. I couldn't do it without you. I hope you realize how blessed I feel and how thankful I truly am for each and every one of you out there. Each and every single one of you. And just the way that it's touched my life. I mean, this is what's been amazing about the journey for me, is that it's just it's been incredibly rewarding. It's been incredibly rewarding. You know, we had Stefan Molyneux on a couple of weeks ago, and he said, Christopher, do you do this full time? And I said, yeah, I do. I've been doing this full time for about 3 years now. I said, you know what? That's fantastic. That's so amazing. That's awesome. He said, you'll find it's not the most financially rewarding, but it's the most rewarding thing you can do. And it's not the easy path. It's the hard path, but it's the most rewarding where it counts. And honestly, I can vouch for that, because I really do feel that way. And that's why I get excited. That's why my blood gets boiling. I feel the pressure. I like being under pressure. I feel what's coming. I know what's coming down the pike. I have that spiritual awareness. And again, I'm not a genius. I'm not a prophet or anything like that. I'm a human being. And I sense this through my sensory perception. Everything that's coming down the pike. And what's coming down the pike here in America, and what's funny is if you watch that video, 2013, the next president will inherit the global depression, you'll see just how far ahead of the curve we were over a year ago. There's a ton of copycats now. They try to copycat, the types of things that we do, type of things that I do. Like, they predicted this stuff. No, you didn't. You didn't predict this stuff. And it's not about predictions. It's not about the predictive nature. I talked about this on the last show. It's about awareness. It's about having a self-awareness for what's happening around us and dividing what is propaganda, what is baseless, what is useless, to what is real, what is tangible. So, of course, we're approaching the election here. It doesn't matter who the next president is. They're going to inherit the greatest calamity that the world has ever seen. And they're going to wait until the election is ironed out before ushering in that crash, before ushering in a capital market crash, a capital market disruption. People get all excited. I'm a former Wall Street guy myself. So, people get all excited when they see this little stock market moving on up. Moving on up. They think it's so great. 200 points there, 300 points there. Of course, it's a lie. It's a fabrication. It's been manipulated by quantitative easing into infinity, Operation Twist, the Federal Reserve buying $40-50 billion in additional mortgage-backed securities per month, totally destroying our currency. So it's a total lie. It's on just a bed of hot air and rising, bigger than the bubble than what we saw in 2008. But people forget. I don't forget, because I'm a former Wall Street guy type. For better or worse, that's what I did before I became a rogue media personality and told the establishment to go F itself. I'm kind of doing the symbology to the camera there. I remember the days when I'm sitting at the office, I've got 3-4 computer monitors in front of me, and I'm watching the markets burn to the ground. I'm talking 1,000-point drops out of nowhere. I'm watching major financial institutions go to zero, literally. Washington Mutual, you probably remember that. Yeah, we closed shop one day, and I checked online past after hours, and it was the government just decided randomly to not bail out Washington Mutual. We're just not going to do it for Washington. We're going to do it for Bank of America. We're going to do it for these other companies, so all the shareholders lost everything. Think about all the pensions, the retirees. I knew these people. I know these people, even to this day. Lost everything, their entire investment in these types of companies. Because, of course, the federal government had to be very selective about, who they're going to save. Basically which special interest groups and which companies of the corporatocracy, I'm kind of jumping around on words here, or having trouble with that word today, but which companies to save and, who's going to pay them off the most. So obviously Bank of America, it was the biggest payoff. Obviously companies like, JP Morgan Chase, Warren Buffett's Wells Fargo and Goldman Sachs, those are the crony companies. Those are the special interest groups that own the politicians. So they were saved, but everyone else was screwed. And it's amazing that through all of this, I mean, honestly, you got to hand it to these criminals. You got to hand it to them because they actually got away with it. That's a very important point I want to drive home with you because we talked a lot about, action, strategies, how to plug yourself out of the matrix, which I've personally done. I'm a living example of that. I'm not a perfect person. I don't have everything figured out, but have I plugged out of the system? You bet your ass. I don't do business with any of these scumbag companies. I don't do any business with these scumbag banks. I don't do any business with these scumbag people. They're dead to me, and I will not support them with a single dollar because you know what? You vote with your wallet every single day. So it's the little things that they're waking up to this. I mean, if everybody woke up to this at once, we're still a minority, although that's growing, it would literally destroy and put all these scumbags out of business literally by the end of the show. We've got about, an hour 45 left. They would be done by the end of the show. People just took their money out, said, you know what, I'm not going to do business with Wells Fargo. I'm not going to do business with XYZ because you know what, they're scumbags. They pickpocketed America. They stole $15 trillion. That's the number, $15 trillion just in 2008 alone. Okay, that doesn't include the trillions of dollars since then and all the new quantitative easing projects. Notice how notice how Helicopter Ben has been carefully displaced out of the debates. The Federal Reserve, never mentioned. Ben Bernanke, not mentioned. He's been displaced. In fact, he's been really in exile. He's been teaching at my former university, George Washington University, for much of the past few months. He's been exiled because, think about it, the guy's extremely unpopular. He's the one helping to inject the heroin so that America overdoses. Now, he might just be the guy, carrying the needle and, poking it in the arm. Obviously, he's being, instructed by other people to do that. But, he's helped the death. And the death has already occurred. This is American suicide at its finest. I don't know how fine that is, but it is American suicide, and it's to the detriment of the American people. So what I see clearly, just like I saw a year and a half ago and 3 years ago, I told you, quantitative easing, it'll never stop. The minute the bank bailout started, it'll never stop. It'll continue into infinity. I told you right after QE1, expect QE2. I told you right after QE2, expect QE3. I told you to expect riots a month before the outburst of Occupy Wall Street, a month before the Arab Spring protests. I told you to watch for false flag events overseas in the Middle East. Obama went in, invaded, killed Muammar Gaddafi. One of our videos, in fact, that'll be one of the classics I'll put up because we predicted that, predicted the invasion of Libya and the takedown of what they call a dictator in Muammar Gaddafi. Of course, Obama goes into Syria next, complete destabilization. Now we've got sanctions on Iran. Now we're worried about weapons of mass destruction again, nukes, and that's all the talk. That was all the rage of the debates. And so what I'm telling you now, take it from the guy who's not a copycat. I'm one of the originals here within the movement, within, the liberty and freedom and the cause itself. And that's not to say there's not others out there that are doing a fine, damn good job and have been at this a lot longer than me. But I'm telling you now, take it from a guy that predicted a lot of this stuff, that expect the financial collapse to be completely ushered in as we start the new year. Expect to inherit. You're not going to inherit money. It's not a good thing. You're not going to inherit, some kind of payout. You're not going to inherit, winning some kind of lottery. You're going to inherit massive debt, your children as well, and their children, because it's that large, and you're going to inherit a very violent global war. That's what we have to look forward to, and you know what? That is scary. Can't really beat around the bush there. Stay tuned. I'm going to go to your calls next. Christopher Green, Greenwave Radio Live. Buddy, we are back. I'm Christopher Green. This is Greenwave Radio Live. We are broadcasting around the world, 11 days and counting before the launch of amtbmedia.com. We have a fantastic show today. I'll be interviewing Kent Bain for the first time. He'll be making his debut. He's become highly recommended. He is the author and mastermind behind the most dangerous book in the world, 9/11 as Mass Ritual. And I'm looking at the cover photo here in the book. It shows, just this haunting image of New York City, the downed buildings. Just what a horrifying light bulb moment day for America. And, I think we all remember where we are. They call it light bulb flash memory, where we were when we first learned that those planes were, driving themselves into these buildings. So we're going to get into all of this. We're going to get into the occult. We're going to get into the very evil nature, the mind control, and dig into all these details. And I really consider, many people do, and this is why he came recommended, obviously, as an expert in this area. And I'm reading the description of the book here. It says, in this shocking expose, investigative researcher and author Kent Bain reveals the truth behind the mass murdering psychopaths responsible for the events of September 11, 2001, and reconstructs the occult-driven script for this global Luciferian mega ritual. As Bain uncovers, the framework for the entire event was a psychological warfare campaign built upon a deadly foundation of black magic and high technology. The book details the sinister nature of the defining event of the 21st century and explains the vast scope of the machinery of oppression that has been constructed all around us. And I encourage you, please support people like this. Please support Kent. And check out his book. We've got a link for it, again, on our YouTube video today. It always kind of gets to me when people say, they'll say things like, how much money is this guy making on this book? He's talking about 9/11, and he's talking about all these things that scare people. Well, he's just a fearmonger, researcher, blah, blah, blah. Well, that really kind of gets my goat, because we, as I just said earlier in the first show, need to support and vote with our wallets those people that are sharing the truth with the world. And I know many of you do that. And I know for many of you that's preaching to the choir. But I really just don't understand the cynicism and the criticism from a lot of people that feel that these type of people, these type of authors, people within the media, et cetera, aren't supposed to be compensated for their very hard work, that they, take on great risk to share with the world. And people forget the risk that people like Kent and many others take to do what they do. I'm looking here at a major headline. This is on the Drudge Report. It says, he's a bullshitter, with a picture of a very aggressive Obama. Also, we've got, it looks like Romney is, clearly in the lead with a 50% over 47%, depending on which statistics you're looking at and which poll results you're looking at so far, pre-poll results. But I'm looking at this article, and it says, doesn't it take a bullshitter to know one? Isn't that the old saying? Don't you have to be a bullshitter to know a bullshitter, which is what Obama's talking about? I'm going to go to your calls here in a moment. I see there's quite a few of you in the queue. So just patiently, I'll get to you in just a quick second. I'll have the producers go ahead and light that up for me. President Obama sat for an interview with Rolling Stone for next month's issue, and Playbook has the first look at the story by Douglas Brinkley. This is a quote. We arrived at the Oval Office for our 45-minute interview on the morning of October 11th. As we left the Oval Office, executive editor Eric Bates told Obama that he had asked his 6-year-old if there was anything she wanted him to say to the president. She said, "Tell him, you can do it." Obama grinned. "You know, kids have good instincts," Obama offered. "They look at the other guy and say, well, that's bullshit. I can tell." So he is very much alluding to Romney, his competitor. I think that the power structure is already decided, although a lot of people disagree with me. A lot of people think it's going to be Obama. I would say almost 99% of the people I talk to within the media and the alternative media world say Obama. I'm not buying it. I could be wrong. I think it's Romney. That's been my prediction from the get-go. That is some very frank language from Barack Obama, who has a genuine disdain for GOP challenger Mitt Romney, and talks about Politico's Glenn Thrush reporting on this. It's also a much more direct way of saying Romney has been hit with a case of Romnesia and has seemingly forgotten what he has stood for in the past. I'm looking at some Facebook comments here. It says, "Very presidential. He should know since he is the king of bullshitters." And then someone responds, a person named Milton, "Please, who was the one who abandoned every policy position in the last debate and practically endorsed his opponent's record? Mitt Romney is an unprincipled liar, and he's about to learn that being able to say anything is an unprincipled liar no longer wins election." The comments, some of these comments don't even make sense. This is from Joseph Scott Ballard. "Obama's foreign policy successes are a continuation of Bush's policies. Drones were increasing under Bush, plans for Iraq draw down, etc. It's tough for a Republican to show too much of a difference on a guy that is acting like a Republican overseas." Let's go to some of your calls here. A few of you patiently waiting. Again, our number, our direct line, 218-339-8525, 218-339-8525. Let's go to a 360 area code, 360. Hi, you're on the air. What's on your mind?
Hey, Chris. What's up, pal?
Hey.
How you doing?
I'm doing pretty well. How about yourself?
Pretty good. I kind of got a what-if question. I asked Fabian this, but I didn't really get an answer. It's kind of like a goofy question, you know, probably unrealistic. But I just want to know your take and what your thoughts. You know, this is completely your opinion.
Yeah.
If the United States of America gets nuked, what are the likely places, like the most likely states they would target?
Well, it's kind of funny you bring this up, and I'm going to be really interested to talk to Ken about this. This is a part of the book I haven't gotten to yet.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I mean, and this actually hits close to home, so, you know, it's not something I really I enjoy, I guess, talking about, but this is about truth. We're supposed to be uncomfortable with these topics. But let me get to exactly what he said here, because he put this in a message to me. He says, well, this is from Kent. He's coming on the show at the top of the second hour. He says, well, you'll be especially interested in the second half of the book, then, as it predicts a nuclear false flag attack on Phoenix, December 25th, 2012. So
really?
Yeah, we're going to have to dig in to that, and we'll have him kind of explain himself and, you know, why they're, I guess, alluding to that.
I got that question for you, but I also got a comment to that.
Sure.
Well, wouldn't it be more damaging to attack like New York City that have like millions and millions and millions of people, or Los Angeles, or even Washington D.C.? Would that be most likely better targets than Arizona, or are they just targeting the Patriots, you know, the Texans and all those people over in that area? Because I'm sure they'll feel the after effect of that.
Yeah, well, think about it. That's a really excellent point. The obvious, I mean, yeah, if you're, you know, you got to think from the terrorist perspective. Obviously, they're going to want to hit the, you know, the biggest cities, New York, Washington, D.C., really any major city where they can cause the most damage. And, you know, that's kind of the truth of it. So, you know, yeah, in a real collapse situation scenario, suitcase bomb or a nuke or something like that, yeah, do you want to be in the cities, in the big cities? No. That's going to be the last place that you're going to want to be. You're going to want to be somewhere in the country, somewhere where you can kind of take care of yourself and you're away from the masses and you're away from a very compact population all trying to get at resources at the same time. So the big cities are obviously the targets. I mean, that's pretty obvious. But you bring up an excellent point. And to me, I almost find it and would find it more scary to see terrorist-type acts carried out in just regular run-of-the-mill cities, places. You know, we talked about September 11th. One of my big fears, and the fear of a lot of people, is that we're going to start seeing this in every shopping mall, movie theater, grocery store around the country. I mean, that to me, that's 1,000 times more scary because it puts in the psychological, it conditions you that you're not safe anywhere. It conditions you to, well, geez, if I go to the supermarket, am I going to die today?
Exactly.
That's what's amazing to me, and honestly, think about that too. That's what's amazing. We're expected to believe that there was this highly choreographed, one in the million, attack during September 11th that took down not just 2 buildings, but a third building. We'll talk to Ken about this in a perfect demolition. They made no mistakes. They were so successful. The United States defense system, our defenses were completely caught with their pants down. I mean, it makes we either did it, not we, but the government's either in on it or we're the biggest.
Oh yeah, definitely. Well, they did that. Well, when they said that when they took the trade towers down, there was I think it was a broadcast or something. Like, okay, guys, back up. We're gonna take down the trade towers, and people are like, what the hell are you talking about? And how can one plane, how can a plane take down a whole building? It looked like it didn't even. Well, it wasn't even a critical hit, that building could have withstood an airplane, but the best thing to do is get food storage, so you don't have to go to the store and be threatened, oh my God, am I going to get bombed, But my second question is the Federal Reserve. If, I'm not saying he will, but if Mitt Romney gets in and some miracle happens where he's just like, oh my God, this guy is actually doing something, if he decides to get rid of the Federal Reserve, what are the certain steps do us, the people, and Mitt Romney have to take to get rid of the Federal Reserve? There's nothing but a pain in our ass for 75 years.
Yeah.
Longer.
That's an excellent question, and it's kind of a tough one to answer. I mean, number one, Romney's not going to he'd never in a million years get rid of the Federal Reserve. None of these people are going to do that. What he will do for show is if he is elected, he will quickly fire Ben Bernanke. They'll pitch that as a big media storm, as being a very big deal, but he'll be replaced by someone just like him. Because the next
probably would.
They won't be able to do anything differently. I mean, they're going to have to keep printing the currency, launching QE into infinity. I mean, nothing will change. But the question that I think is a tough one to answer, and maybe we can kind of, throw this out to the audience as well, is, well, how would we force... I mean, how would we end the Federal Reserve? How do we do that?
Well, how would we do that? Because the guy tried to, I think the terrorists tried to bomb, I think the New York Federal Reserve a week ago with a 1,000-pound bomb, and that would collapse the economy. So I don't see what's the difference of blowing it up or dismantling it. They're getting rid of it no matter what.
I mean, quite frankly, to be honest with you, in terms of looking at it from the terrorist perspective, I don't even think the physical nuke attack is really the greatest threat at all. I mean, obviously that would be horrible, devastating. It would be the worst thing that could ever happen. But I actually don't even perceive that as the greatest threat. I honestly think the technological threat has far more gravity and weight to it than a physical bomb.
But if, back in the 50s, people were afraid of that. I'm thinking to a extent that people are still afraid of that. If a bomb goes off, that could be a major false flag. People go crazy. Then Obama declares martial law. Then, then the economy collapses, even more martial law, and bring people over from foreign countries to police the Americans. It's just another thought there,
Yeah.
That could be a major false flag.
Let me ask you, what would you personally find more scary? A nuke going off in New York City that took out the entire city, or maybe say it happened in D.C. or something hypothetically? Would that be more scary, or would it be more scary to wake up tomorrow and have every cell phone, computer, automobile, gas station completely shut down, electricity, and total darkness? no communication, and just pure chaos in the streets because nobody knows what's happening and what's going on. What would you view as more scary as just, as an American?
Well, we know nukes. People are like, oh my God, a nuclear bomb is going to go up and blow up New York City. A lot of times people think that, one nuke is going to blow up the whole country. Maybe, a lot of people think that a nuke will blow up the whole country. It would take like 4 or 5 nuclear bombs to blow up the whole country. An EMT attack, like you suggest, a lot of people will probably starve to death. They say that you can only live with water for about 3 days, and probably food for about 7. So in about 7 days, people will start by the millions dying unless you don't have food storage. And if that happens, I know exactly where I'm going, where the food's at. And that's where my mom's at. And she's out in the middle of nowhere. And she knows this. She got a half a cow not too long ago, butchered it and everything like that. So, and people won't be able to get the medication. Like the elderly people won't be able to go get the medications they need to live. And a lot of people will just start dying just because no food. And they probably poison the water,
Well,
so,
and they're already doing that. I mean, they're already poisoning our foods and our water and our air and our minds. I mean, we are poisoned, and that's kind of the problem. But it's not that, people would probably die. They would die, especially if we had an EMP wiped out the infrastructure. It'd be, honestly, a very effective false flag from the government perspective because they basically take down the infrastructure without really having to detonate a physical bomb. I would give people, honestly, and hold on there, we'll come back to you after the break, but I would give it maybe an hour or two before the panic would just honestly, imagine the panic in suburbia. I mean, it's not funny, but Greenwave Radio Live, broadcasting around the world, courtesy of our syndicate, AFR, greenwave.com, and the soon-to-be launched in 11 days and counting, AMTVmedia.com, the home of our network. I'll be interviewing Kent Bain here at the top of the second hour. We're talking false flag, terrorism, EMPs. He is the author of the most dangerous book in the world, 9/11 as Mass Ritual. So stay tuned for that. We are on the air with our callers. I'm going to go back to that previous call, and we're going to go to a few others here in just a moment. Hi, friend. Are you still on the air?
Hey, Chris.
Yeah, so it sounded like you kind of wanted to get another question out there or comment. We're talking about all these hypothetical events that could potentially happen, threaten America, how easy it would be for our government to implement these kinds of false flag staged events, much like what we saw on September 11th. What would you like to add to that?
Well, I just want to point out that, I don't want to get all religious on this. It could be offending for some people, but an EMT attack, the only thing you really need to do is get prepared. You look at Noah in the ark, and a lot of people laughed at him. He's like, he's building an ark, middle of nowhere, and all the people outside were laughing at him and thought he was crazy. They waited and waited and waited and waited. And eventually it started raining, and then it started getting flooding, and he had a boat, and they did it. He was prepared and did what God told him to do. And if you take God out of it, everyone's going to die. I think that's the way of God, for God to cleanse all the land, cleanse all the evil people. So if you're prepared, you shall not fear. And I think if you have your food storage and clean water and stuff like that, then you should be fine. If an EMT does go off, you can live with that. And some people, they'll live in paycheck by paycheck and just not doing what they're supposed to do,
Oh, yeah. Well, that's more true in America today than any time in history. The problem with it is you've got a great majority of Americans. I mean, think about it. If it were to happen, I mean, it really is a question of when. It's going to happen at some point. No one can predict when. But when an EMP attack does strike, you'll be sending an American population and a global population back to the Stone Age without Stone Age skills. And it's an incredibly dangerous situation to be in. And the sad truth is most Americans aren't prepared for that. They don't have an alternative to deal with something like that. They're not physically prepared. They're not emotionally prepared. They're not spiritually prepared. And, you mentioned you're talking about, God and, people having a religious perspective of that too. I also think that could be very well manipulated by the government for the people to play into that, the end of the world, 2012, hysteria. So that in and of itself can be dangerous as well.
Well, yeah, and God says always be prepared and stuff like that. But a lot of people are not religious. A lot of it's atheists. A lot of people take offensive to that, so they just don't listen to what they have to say. And I guess in the end, they're not going to make it, since they have no food storage and they just turn their back on God. Look at the founding of the United States. George Washington got beaten tons of times, but as soon as they turned God, it was more of a divine win than it was militarily.
Yeah, and anytime there's we're so propagandized, we're so manipulated, we're living in a false reality. What's really going to count and matter, in a situation like an EMP or, an event where we have martial law here in America, or, we have another attack like September 11th, what's going to matter to the people is what's real. And it's going to be a back to basics, a back to reality. And, in a lot of ways, that can be really great, I think, for mankind and really great for humanity.
We'll break the trance that they have over, Paris Hilton and, EMT TV, oh, my God, what's Paris Hilton doing next, and what's Britney Spears doing next? That's a trance. It's a mind control. Why who cares? What happened to the days where you can pick up the magazine or newspaper and see what's going on in the world, the truth, Now you read a newspaper or magazine, something but, Paris Hilton's getting new shoes, or Lindsay Lohan is another DUI, Well, another question is, do you think Obama would do an Order 66, execute Order 66, and just start wiping everyone out?
It's possible. Yeah, it's possible. I mean, look, they wouldn't be passing bills like the NDAA unless they plan on using them, and that's why he's using his executive power. We've seen this. It's not about it's not about predictions necessarily or what's going to happen. Just look at history. I mean, what's happened in history? Wasn't too long ago, Japanese Americans were gathered up like cattle and honestly, stationed in internment camps here in Arizona and other parts of the western United States. Wasn't too long ago. So, I mean, it's happened before. Why wouldn't it happen again?
Yeah, exactly. Well, in closing, I think America's going to win, no matter what. We're always going to get on top. We're going to beat the bankers. We're going to do that, It doesn't mean we're not going to go through hell, Look at Star Wars, For example, they were a republic, and eventually they went to an imperial state, and that's where we're going. We're going to an imperial state. But eventually, much later on, they defeated the Imperials, and that's what we're going to do. Eventually, we will defeat them. America will stand for liberty and freedom. I believe that's what's going to happen. We may get become an empire, but eventually we will win. We will beat these tyrannies.
The truth will set you free. I believe that too, and that's where. That's where the hope is. That's why there's so much, there's so many things that are positive that can come from this. And that's why it's not about fear mongering or putting people into, fearing for their lives on a daily basis. It's about awareness, understanding how we're being manipulated, used by the system. I put out a video yesterday, which was another Green Wave class that we just rehashed and put out again. Who among us is the PSYOP? And it's really just a look into questioning who we are and everybody around us, everybody, including myself, within the Truth, Freedom, Liberty movement. And it wasn't a hit piece on anybody. I put Alex Jones in there. It wasn't a hit piece on him or myself or anybody else. It's just, let's question everything. Hey, if this is about truth, if this is about asking tough questions and not being afraid to be uncomfortable at times, and a lot of the time that's kind of, if you're really seeking for the truth and digging down the rabbit hole, you're going to be uncomfortable. You're going to have to kind of step into the unknown, which a lot of people are afraid of doing. A lot of people, if they don't
want to leave their comfort zone.
They don't want to leave their comfort zone. I know a lot of people like this. A lot of people I really like, love, and respect, but it's like if they haven't experienced and it's not in their it's not something that they know well, they're very frightened and scared of it. Even if maybe, it's interesting how that psychology works with people.
Yeah, exactly. It's just all around. Like, I'm afraid of a lot of stuff, Like, I want to go to Japan to teach English, but I'm freaking scared to death to leave the United States, because, hey, I don't know any language, and I don't know what's going to happen if I leave. Would I not come back to a country? Would it be gone? Would it be martial law? Would it be what I thought it is?
Well, that's what's kind of interesting about it. I mean, a lot of people ask and are fearful of the exact opposite. They're afraid of staying. They're afraid of what happens if I stay. My thoughts are, I love this country. I love America. I love what we fundamentally stand for, not what the people in power stand for. But I love America. Like you said, America will win. Truth will win. Truth will set you free. The people will win. This is global. And these are the changes we're going through. But yeah, it's, I've got a lot of friends myself that, left the country years ago and they're not coming back. They seem to have made really great lives for themselves. And some of them are trilingual now in just about, a few years since they've been there. So, the world is a big place, but it's also gotten smaller now that we can travel and, now that we have the free movement of information technology and the internet, that's kind of opened a lot of and broken through a lot of barriers. I think the more experience we can all have and the more perspective we can get and the more international travel you can do, I honestly think is for the better. I think it'll give us a better perspective here at home as well. And I wouldn't let a fear stand in the way of you trying new things or teaching English in Japan or learning a different language or trying something new. I think that's something we should all get used to and kind of just walk towards the fire, and you'll be better for it. And I think a lot of good things can happen, not just for you, but for all people if they're to face their fear.
Yeah, you don't want that. That's one of the tools the government uses is fear. Fear that you won't get your food stamps and fear of this and fear of that. I'm like, why don't you just face your fears? You'll be stronger in the long run. You'll be more independent. But a lot of times, people just don't want to be independent. They just want the welfare check. They want to live the nice style. America's supposed to be rich. I don't think any of us actually seen what being rich is all about in America because we've been robbed for so long,
Yeah, and that money wasn't real. That life wasn't real in the first place. That in itself is a reality check. Thank you, caller, for calling in. A lot of great questions. Awesome talking to you. I've got Kent, author of The Most Dangerous Book in the World, coming up next. Looking forward to that. Stay tuned, everybody. I'm Christopher Green, Greenwave Radio Live.
Welcome to the Daily Wave.
Hey, everybody. We are back. I am Christopher Green. This is Greenwave Radio Live, broadcasting around the world on this beautiful day in Phoenix. It's absolutely amazing. One of the reasons that we live here. I have the great pleasure of introducing an author of The Most Dangerous Book in the World, 9/11 as Mass Ritual, Kent Bain. Kent, how are you doing, my friend?
Good. How are you, Chris?
I'm doing great. We had a really great first hour of the show. We've been taking calls from our listeners, talking about September 11th, staged terrorism, what could potentially be next. I read a little bit of the expose of your book, but I wanted to dig into all the details. You're an expert in this area. Explain to our audience and introduce yourself. How did you get started in this? What provoked you to say, you know what, I'm going to write a book on 9/11?
Well, of course, there are dozens and dozens of books that have already been written from a lot of different angles. And as I began my own research into 9/11, which I was a bit of a latecomer, I didn't really start looking seriously at 9/11 conspiracy theories until about 2006, 2007. And so I had a lot of, I guess, catch up to do. And as I did my research and did reading from various authors and was looking at conspiracy theory blogs and websites, there was a sort of a track of research that appeared to be rather untouched and just hinted out in different places. And there seemed like there were little pieces of the puzzle lying all over the place, but there was a larger story that had not been told, had not been pulled together. And in particular, this was the what appeared to be a psychological warfare component of 9/11 that was only hinted at in various writings, and some researchers had gotten, I think, a head start on a number of different fronts. But I just sensed that there was a larger story there, and as I began to dig into it, I found a lot of different things that were suspicious to me and didn't seem to add up, and certainly didn't make sense in context to the official story of 9/11. So it was a process, and
so dig into that a little bit, the psychological warfare component. What do you mean by that?
Well, of course, most of your listeners probably don't buy the 9/11 Commission report, the account contained in that of the events of 9/11. And as you begin to look for explanations as to what did happen, what seems to fit the evidence, and of course the Commission's report does not account for the evidence very well at all. And as you try to make sense of what you're finding as you look at the facts related to 9/11, a sort of a disturbing pattern emerges, that it appears that it was not just a false flag operation, military style operation, but there were a whole range of things that were taking place in the background and in support of the larger operation. And as I did my own research and read others who were kind of looking in the same direction, what I was finding was that there seemed to be a very sophisticated, very well thought out psychological warfare program that had been executed in support of the logistics of 9/11 and targeting the perceptions and the attitudes of the American public, really the global public. And that's I guess a difficult thing for most people to grasp, how something that is horrendous as 9/11 is already known to be, how it could be any worse. But it appears there was a really sophisticated program, psychological warfare program, mind control program that was underlying the day's events. And not just that, but that that program was suffused with black magic symbolism and ritual elements, which is not uncommon in psychological warfare practice, but we've really never seen anything of the scale on which it was executed on 9/11. And when I first began to encounter the bits and pieces of this, I was extremely skeptical, and that's why I dug into it so aggressively. I thought this has got to be just hogwash, and I'm going to get into this and find out that these are just harebrained conspiracy theories. And I thought I would be able to find be able to debunk them fairly quickly. And unfortunately, the opposite happened. Is the more I pieced together, the more I examined it, and the more I studied sort of classical psychological warfare practices. What emerged was a picture of 9/11 as a mass psych warfare operation, and with very definite sort of Luciferian overtones. And there's a clear purpose and methodology that practitioners have for incorporating the occult elements into psychological warfare, and that's to increase the trauma to the victims, and whether it's you're conducting a mind control operation on an individual or a group of individuals or on a global populace, the ritual elements, the occult elements, increase the trauma exponentially, really, and make them the subjects more susceptible to what you're trying to accomplish and to the message that you're trying to impart to them, or the behaviors that you're trying to modify. And so, again, this was something that was very new to me as I began to first encounter it.
So I just want to stop you there for a minute. So give us some specific examples of the symbology, these Luciferian overtones that were used to increase the, I guess I'm trying to think of the best word, but the reaction, the aspect of psychological warfare, the trauma experienced by the American people. Give us some specific examples of what was used and how they implemented that.
Right. In putting together the sort of what I refer to as the occult script for 9/11, I took the day really sort of incident by incident, event by event, and dissected it, and in writing the book touched on the different symbols that were involved and were utilized, give a bit of background on the symbols and how they're used in the occult arts, and then specifically in the dark occult arts, what we'd refer to as black magic. And there, of course, is a difference between black magic and white magic. And 9/11 was concerned exclusively with black magic from that perspective. But you have to take each incident and sort of profile it and look at the symbol, what it means in terms of the occult arts, how it was utilized, and then you have to look at the overall script and see how each incident sort of ties together. And so you end up really with a multi-act script for this macabre production. And the elements, the ritual elements and the symbols that were used, not in every instance are held to be evil. For instance, the Pentagon is a symbol with a long occult tradition, and it's not held to be exclusively evil by all traditions or cultures, and it was in fact considered to be a symbol of protection by some cultures. But of course, in context of the 9/11 mega ritual, it was intended to evoke dark energies, and it was used in a really sophisticated way. And the part of what my challenge in writing the book and attempting to convey the importance of the occult component to listeners is that there's no one single example that I can give, or even two, that people are going to say, "Aha, he's absolutely right." And that for me, that was certainly the case as I researched this. It ended up being the collective weight of the evidence in the book, and the way that the individual symbols were used, and in a number of instances they were repeated, and then the different interconnections.
What symbols was that? I mean, specifically, what types of symbols? Was a part of the imagery that we saw when the planes hit, or what are you specifically getting at?
Well, the Twin Towers were intended to invoke the twin pillars of Freemasonry, or the Jachin and Boaz, the Temple of Solomon, the pillars that were on the part of that temple, and there's a deep esoteric background with these symbols, and they're very important to Freemasons and to a range of occultists. And by incorporating the symbols and destroying the symbols in this instance with the towers, there was certainly a very powerful statement made, so that it wasn't as simple as terrorists in planes attacking the symbols of America's financial might. There was an occult statement being made through the destruction of these towers, and it really does take a good bit of background reading and explanation to set up exactly what it meant, what the numbers of the planes that were involved in the 9/11 attacks, what they meant, and what you'll find in reading is that in just about every single instance, whether it was the attack on the Twin Towers or the attack on the Pentagon or the downing of Flight 93 in Shanksville or several other instances, there were multiple symbols, multiple numbers of power numbers, or numbers that are extremely important in terms of the numerology, and they were melded together in a very specific way that made a very specific statement. And then you had a series of those that then connect, and so you've got really an ongoing ritual throughout the day. And it's not just an attack in New York City or an attack in Washington, D.C., but these individual components of the occult ritual, they're not separate and isolated. They are, in fact, connected in a very synergistic, metaphysical way, at least in the minds of those that orchestrated the event.
Mm-hmm. And so there's a lot of planning that obviously was involved. And what you're saying is it's more than just the symbology of the Twin Towers and the might of America and our economy, that there was very much an occult, symbolic reasons and a lot of careful planning that went into this. So who do you actually think were the perpetrators exactly behind the attack? I say at some point in the book that this is, it's not a whodunit, and it's I do cover what I refer to as, some logical suspects. They're and I give a bit of a background on some of the different organizations that one might suspect would be involved with a plot of this nature, but would be really difficult to know with specificity which organizations were involved. And so I didn't spend much time at all on that. I mean, of course. So if we're detectives, if our audience is the detective and we're playing that role, who are then the top suspects in your opinion? I mean, it's tough to narrow it down with any specificity, as you just mentioned, but who are the suspects?
Well, of course, there would have had to have been involvement by a number of different Bush administration officials, but the idea of 9/11 as a Bush administration coup or just false flag that was the brainchild of that specific administration, that the evidence goes far beyond that and points to a much more extensive ongoing plot that would have required much more time to develop and execute. So those individuals within the Bush administration that certainly appeared to have been complicit and had would have needed to have foreknowledge, and and then the elements within the U.S. government that would you would think would have to, if not had actors within it that were key players and facilitators of the event, then from the Department of Defense to CIA, certainly those institutions, if they were not orchestrators, then they were manipulated at a very, very high level by interests, international actors that you can just infer would have to have an enormous amount of power and influence in order to be able to do what they did. And so I'm not sure how familiar you are with the Illuminati and the whole New World Order conspiracy cabal, but sure. You end up in looking at the evidence, there's very much a stereotype of the New World Order and of the Illuminati. But, given that I didn't try to say specifically who executed this event, you end up in looking at the evidence and then trying to reverse engineer, okay, who would have had to have been involved.
Sure. Well, the criticism I hear a lot is that, when we refer to the Illuminati or the New World Order, or I call it, the power structure at times, is that a lot of people say, well, it's this mysterious, evil-natured group of people sitting in a dark room smoking cigars. I mean, who are these people, and can you quantify it to a greater degree than just knowing that it looks like, powerful people somewhere, orchestrating these types of events and having just tremendous power and influence over, not just staged terror attacks, but the mainstream media, our economy, our capital markets. How do you, and we're going to get to this when we get back. I've got to go to a quick break. I'm here with Kent Bain talking about false flag terror, September 11th. Awesome show. We're going to take your calls on this as well. I'm sure you got a lot of questions coming from our audience. Everybody stay tuned. I'm Christopher Green. We'll be right back. We are back. I am Christopher Green, Greenwave Radio Live, broadcasting around the globe. I'm here with Kent Bain, author of the most dangerous book in the world, 9/11 is Mass Ritual. Now, before the break, Kent, we were discussing the few minutes we had there. I'm kind of cornering you, putting you in a corner. Who did it? Who did it? Who are the actors? Who are the perpetrators? And, you were explaining to me that although you've got your list of suspects, the real, point you were driving home with the book was it proving that there was an existence of a plot in the first place, and that, you can pretty much put two and two together and see how this was pre-planned, how this was a prepackaged act of terror, implemented on the American people, an act of psychological warfare where, everyday Americans, we've been traumatized by that day. I mean, it's been a decade plus later, and look how America still feels about that tragic day. So explain that a little bit in a little more detail.
Sure. Again, the purpose in writing the book was to demonstrate clearly that a plot existed, and that it was not just a group of Muslim extremists with box cutters that executed this attack, but that there were multiple layers and multiple levels of deception, and the occult component was just an additional component that really had not been explored thoroughly. But when you put all the evidence together that establishes that an occult component was present, that then becomes fairly compelling proof of the existence of an enormous plot. And so when you stand back and you begin to think, okay, who would have had to have been involved? What level would our government have had to be manipulated in order for these things to have unfolded as they appear to have? You come up with some a list of agencies and in some cases individuals and institutions that would have needed to have been involved, but I didn't spend nearly as much time on the book exploring the who as really the why, and I've got an appendix where I cover some of the different organizations that could be thought of as logical suspects, but didn't dwell on that very long because others have plowed that ground a lot more effectively and thoroughly than I have. But there are certainly organizations that you can look to that fit the profile. And so if you look at the occult script as a criminal profile, there are certainly good matches for who those criminals might have been that were involved. And so that's merits further study and investigation. And
so let's dig into the why. And that's what I'm always personally interested in is motive. And right. I have my own ideas of what the motive was. Dig into the why for us. Why was this masterminded? Why was this packaged? And why are the American people expected to believe as a couple Muslim terrorists with box cutters, And what are the chances of honestly such an effective strike of terror against the United States as what we saw at 9/11? I mean, that in and of itself raises alarm bells for me. Just how effective they supposedly were in taking down these buildings. And then, of course, we have the anomalies, Building 7, Flight 93. I want to hear your thoughts on that as well.
Right. Well, that's one thing that you begin to get a feel for as you work through the material in the book, is that a lot of the occult elements and the psychological warfare programming was done to really create a fog of war. And, of course, in any real war or terrorist attack, there's going to be a certain amount of legitimate fog of war and confusion. But psychological warfare in particular is utilized to confuse the enemy, and it depends on how you define the enemy. In this instance, the target audience was the public, the general public, the American and global public. And we were the intended targets, and the confusion that was created was intentional. And given that there will always be details that never quite get cleared up and things that don't make sense, there was just this just ton of information and details that didn't make sense. And what you really begin to understand over time is that there were aspects, incidents on 9/11 that were built in for the explicit purpose of generating confusion, and some things were made to look purposefully suspicious so that they would be focused on, but then there would be no real resolution. There were no real answers that came about to those questions, and so it's designed to keep us guessing, to keep us looking in different directions, and to have us running off, down one rabbit hole after another, and so we never get to the real questions, or we're so distracted that we don't focus on the real questions, which, as you were kind of getting at, I mean, how does something like this take place in a couple of the most controlled airspaces in the entire world, over Washington, D.C. and New York City, and all of the logical questions, the logistics of how these attacks were pulled off were just, there had to be so much deception that took place within the defense community and the defense infrastructure, so that there was a lot to accomplish in terms of manipulating the aerospace defense system, but then also after the fact preventing serious investigators from really being able to determine what happened. And so a lot of the bizarre elements, the absurd, the openly suspicious elements were put there for a reason, which is to keep people just absolutely befuddled. And most people when confronted with the volume of the evidence and the quirks and the things that don't make sense, and you have experts on both sides that will testify to two completely different explanations for every single component of 9/11. People just walk away in frustration, and that's the purpose.
Yeah. Okay. So would Building 7 fall in that category then? Because even those people. Okay, because even those people that legitimately, believe it was a legitimate terror attack, that the government wasn't involved, this wasn't staged terror, can't explain Building 7. They can't do it. So that's one of the anomalies that you're referencing. I mean, I don't see what the available options are. I mean, outside of it being detonated into a perfect down. I mean, what else could have happened? I mean, just logically.
Given the manner that the building came down in, the only explanation is controlled demolition. There's an entire chapter on Building 7 in the book, and it's just like every other incident, from the destruction of the Twin Towers to the attack on the Pentagon to the downing of Flight 93. Building 7 was I guess you might consider it the final event of the day because it fell later in the day, of course. And there are a number of suspicious things about the destruction of that building, and then about the government agencies that were housed there, and that it fits the pattern that we find with the other components of 9/11, where there are things that are just grossly suspicious to begin with before you even start to consider the occult aspects, and that is. It is very typical of every component of 9/11, and that you'll look at it and there are things that just aren't right, and you know they're not right, and you begin to look for explanations, and you get 2 or 3 different competing explanations at a minimum, and then you're sure that the official story is wrong, but you're not quite sure what did happen, and then beyond that, as you begin to peel back, continue to peel back the onion, you start encountering the occult components and the evidence of psychological warfare. And in Building 7 that fit that exactly, the New York City emergency management bunker was located on the 23rd floor of Building 7, and which made no sense in and of itself because it's in a building with other tenants. It's 23 floors off the ground and required elevators to reach. It was sitting across from the most attractive terrorist target in the entire world, and would obviously be in a position to sustain damage in the event of the attack on the Twin Towers. And it was powered by a massive diesel generator. They had emergency backup generators for the emergency management office, and they had huge diesel gas tanks in the lower, I think, the sub-basement. And that was one of the things that they pointed to that said resulted in the complete destruction of the building in and of itself. But when you parse it all out, that contributed, but it was still, the building came down in controlled demolition style. So that it is something that where there's a lot of things that don't make sense that are suspicious, and then on top of that you have the occult signature for that particular component, which that was known as the Solomon Brothers building, and of course that is a reference to Solomon's Temple and the Twin Towers as the 2 pillars of Freemasonry, Jacquin and Boaz. Well, they sat on the front porch of Solomon's Temple, so that you had what appeared to be just a third unconnected building that fell, that was actually part of that ceremonial center. And I have a chapter in the book devoted to sort of expanding everyone's view of Ground Zero. And it's you don't just have the Twin Towers, you don't just have World Trade Center 7 as Solomon, representing Solomon's Temple, but you've got the Millennium Hotel, which I have a separate chapter on that as well. But then beyond that, there's the World Financial Center with very powerful occult symbols atop those buildings, and then in a really powerful way, you've got the Statue of Liberty, which, even though it's further away, it could certainly be considered part of that ritual ceremonial center. So just like you had the Greek temple complexes and ritual complexes, and you have temple complexes of various other cultures, you can certainly begin to think about the area around Ground Zero as a modern-day concrete and steel mass ritual center. So it wasn't just the Twin Towers, and it wasn't just Building 7, and these weren't unconnected incidents. And so
What are your thoughts on Flight 93? We're expected to believe, or at least was sold to the public, is that American heroes brought the plane down and prevented it from meeting its destination, blowing up another building. Who knows where it was headed? Do you think it was shot down? Do you think jets were scrambled? Is that something that you investigate in the book, or is that another anomaly? What's your take?
Yeah, there's an entire chapter on the downing of Flight 93, and again, it just clearly fits the pattern that we see in every other instance, and there is a strong absurdity factor. There's a strong cult component. We're supposed to believe that the plane came down at such a speed and angle that it completely disappeared into the earth, yet there's wreckage several miles away. It came down in a reclaimed coal mine, and one thing that's really interesting, if you look at satellite imagery of that area before the crash took place, there is a feature in the geography that is extremely similar to in the before and after photographs. In the before photographs, before the plane supposedly went down there, there's a nice rift in that exact location, which raises all sorts of suspicions. And then, of course, the official story raises suspicions. But then you get into, I add some other details that are as suspicious, and as I write in the book about that, and just things that set off all kinds of alarm bells. But then you get into the flight number itself, and the number 93 is extremely important within the philosophy of Thelema, which was established by Aleister Crowley, who is seen as the godfather of modern Satanism. And I haven't mentioned this before, but a lot of what took place has direct connections in terms of the occult script for 9/11. There were direct connections to Aleister Crowley, to the numbers that were significant to his philosophies, to him personally. There were references to, I know this sounds a bit strange, but to his drug habits that were kind of woven into this dark script that's dripping with dark humor. And what you find...
Nothing sounds strange to me anymore, Kent.
Well... I wrote the book with kind of a humorous tone, because what I ended up finding was that even though this was a hideous ritual, it was dripping with dark humor and mockery.
Yeah, well, I want to get into some of that dark humor and mockery when we get back. I'm here with Kent Bain, author of the most dangerous book in the world, 9/11 Mass Ritual. In the second half of the book, it's predicted that there'll be a false flag terror attack on Phoenix December 25th, 2012 this year. I don't know about you. I'm going to take a vacation on that day. I'll be right back with Kent Bain. Stay tuned, everybody, to the show. I'm Christopher Green, of course. I'm here with author Kent Bain of the most dangerous book in the world, 9/11 as Mass Ritual. Before we went to the break, towards the second half of the book, there's a prediction in it that says there will be a false flag terror attack in Phoenix, December 25th, 2012. I was telling you over the break here, Ken, I'm going to make sure I take a vacation on that date specifically. Tell me why Phoenix fits the profile and why this specific prediction was made.
Well, as I finished the first half of the book and I was looking at the sort of the profile for 9/11 and the trying to use it as a criminal profile in a, I guess, CSI fashion to look forward and try to predict what they might do next, where they might strike next. This Phoenix scenario that I've outlined in the second half of the book just emerged rather quickly, and then everywhere I looked, sort of using the occult script for 9/11 as a guide, there was something very suspicious. Where I would expect to find something, there would be an occult marker there, or what could be interpreted as such, and it just came together a little too readily. And as I discussed it with the publisher and we fleshed it out further, we felt like it was worth writing and detailing. And it is the premise is that the 9/11 was not just a one-off event, that it in fact marked a countdown to the end of the Great Age, which is set to take place this year and December of this year, and this ties into the Mayan Doomsday date and 12/21/2012, and it is a significant event on the occult calendar, and not just the Mayan calendar, which, by the way, mainstream Mayan scholars will tell you that the Mayans didn't view that as a doomsday date, but just the beginning of a new cycle of time. But it is viewed by a large segment of the occultists as not just the end of the age, the end of the age of Pisces, but the dawning of a new great age, the resetting, the restarting of the cycle of precession, or the new great age. And they seek to mark that, of course, in a significant fashion, but then to brand it really as the new great age of Lucifer. And so in looking at the occult calendar and this very important date, it could be considered the most important date in human history from an occult perspective, and then looking at where they would seek to carry out a new false flag attack, what makes sense from their perspective and in terms of their thinking and their philosophy. The Phoenix, Arizona is certainly a logical candidate, and in our mind the most logical candidate, because of its the name and the symbol of the phoenix and everything that invokes its importance to not just to Aleister Crowley, but also as a symbol of the Illuminati. And then geographically, physically, where Phoenix located is significant. It's on the 33rd parallel, and there have been any number of other historical incidents that have taken place on the 33rd parallel, from the nuclear test site, Trinity test site, to just a range of other things that I cover in the book. But that's just the framework. There are a lot of other supporting details that really line up behind it and create a compelling scenario. And I have to say, it almost wrote itself. I'm not going to take credit for it, because all I did was look in the logical places, and the things that you would expect to find sort of after the fact. We can see that they've been put in place apparently beforehand, and if we were able to look at the framework that was put in place before 9/11, and we could have seen some things that had been done, sort of predictive programming. That's a lot of people have written a good bit on the predictive programming that was done for 9/11, from the use of the 9/11 in movies and various pop culture references. Well, I was looking for the same sort of thing related to a potential attack on Phoenix, and things just started to emerge, pop out of the woodwork, really, that exactly the kind of predictive programming that you would expect to find if there were an attack that were imminent, the kind of in plain sight, in your face, occult.
Well, I'm just kind of chuckling and in a bizarre way to myself. I'm going to, make sure I call my real estate agent right after the show and get the hell out of here. There's been a lot of what I believe to be staged terror attacks, CIA operated psychological warfare events, attempted murders of Gabriel Giffords, the Jared Loughner character. We saw this in Colorado. Right. Project MK Ultra style mass killings. They said there were multiple people there throwing gas canisters coming from multiple directions on the wall. The unexplainable blood trail. A series of these events, not just one. What's your take on some of that? Do you think that is another plot? And there's does this tie into your research on September 11th in any way?
It does, and even though the second half of the book is, I refer to it as predictive fiction, I include a lot of specific places and details and individuals in the plot. Of course, it has not taken place. I do write about it sort of in past tense, but the markers that are there are really compelling, and I've found them every direction that I looked in. And you had a specific question, and I've gone off and left it now.
Well, I asked you about the these recent terror events, I believe to be staged terror, psychological warfare, the Jared Loughner, MK Ultra, type killings.
Sure. Yeah,
so
sorry.
The question was, is a tie-in to, you said this was going to be, I thought it was interesting. You said this was going to be the dawn of a new age or a great age, but a Luciferian one. That doesn't really sound too great to me. Are these just more examples of how we're being manipulated, how the masses are being, positioned to be fearful and to, spread that terror? Are these the same people? I guess is kind of what I'm getting at. Is it the same, the same type of evil, that we're talking about here? Or?
It is, and I have a chapter on the Gifford shooting as well as the Aurora, Colorado shooting, and what you'll find is that as you look at this and you learn the language that the occultists use to communicate with each other and to construct these rituals, they reference the different rituals. There will be connections between the rituals so that you might find a reference to a previous ritual or even a ritual that is to follow a particular ritual. So they'll be kind of looking backward and looking forward, and there are all these hints that are dropped, and it's all, I guess, part, from their perspective, it's all part of the fun and the mocking us to our faces and just creating the structure for the ritual itself and having these disturbing references just backwards and forwards. But as with the Phoenix scenario, the Gifford shooting is connected. The Aurora, Colorado shooting is connected. Now they're on one hand they're self-contained rituals with their own purposes and symbols, but then they do fit into a larger progression of lesser rituals that are all sort of reinforcing. Many times there are a series of them, and they will look back to and connect to and reference 9/11, but then they also seem to be pointing towards a future event. And as I interpret the rituals themselves and the markers that are there, they really seem to be pointing towards the what I've called Black Christmas. And so they're not just a series of unconnected rituals. Although the individual rituals are major productions and they have their own special qualities, I suppose, they also are part of a progression of ritual in a movement towards and a progression towards something even larger, and so
I want to sorry to interrupt you right there, but I want to make sure, because we got about a minute left. I want to make sure our audience knows where and how to get your book, find more information about you. Of course, I'm here with Kent Bain, author of the most dangerous book in the world, 9/11 as Mass Ritual. In fact, we did a little brief promo on YouTube for you with a link to the Kindle edition. How can our audience find you? How can they buy the book? What's the best way and place to do that?
The book is available on Amazon.com, BarnesandNoble.com. We have a website. It's the most dangerous book in the world.com. The readers can contact me through the contact section of that website. And I'd love to have feedback and to hear from listeners and readers.
Well, awesome. Well, Ken, thank you so much for being on the show today. We'll make sure to have you up with a follow-up interview. I definitely need to read through the section on the Phoenix false flag upcoming terror strike. Pretty scary stuff. Great show, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. All of those of you in the live chat joining us from around the world. As always, I'm Christopher Green, hard-hitting and in your face.